Hello everyone, I'm Sumhiya and you are watching the Advocata's Reset Now Podcast, a podcast where we talk about all things reform. Today I'm joined with Shyranthi, our very own research associate at Advocata Institute. Welcome to the show, Shyranthi.
Hi Sumi, excited to be in Advocata Studio.
Great to have you here, Shyranthi. So to kickstart our podcast, Shyranthi, why don't we start off by talking a little bit about, the work that Advocata has done and also why a Reset Now podcast?
So Advocata is an independent policy think tank, and we focus a lot on the market policies that can be reformed for better. And we've been looking at a lot of reforms throughout the entire time Advocata has been. And by 2019, Advocata has predicted a crisis coming up ahead. We wanted to make everyone a bit aware on this, and we did communicate a lot of information on such a crisis that can happen in future. But unfortunately, in 2020, COVID hit us. And in 2021, November, we had this bad policy of banning fertilizers, chemical fertilizers in Sri Lanka. So all of these natural disasters and the bad policies hit us much earlier, and it also had a bigger impact. So we had hit rock bottom where we had to declare ourselves default at a point. This was completely a life-changing moment for a lot of people. People started questioning. People started questioning, what can we do next? What are the reforms we need but can immediately take us out of this pit we had fallen in? So for that reason, Advocata had organized this conference called Reform Now Conference. And our tagline was, let's reset Sri Lanka. That's one of the reasons why we call this Reset Now podcast. So for that reason, we had brought in the president for the conference, and we also brought in parliamentarians, other policymakers, and also general public. And we wanted everyone to listen to some of these experts talk about certain reforms that could immediately be done and that could immediately take us out of this pit. And we realized the conference was really educating a lot of people, and everyone wanted to keep this conversation going. So one of the reasons why it sparked us that we have to keep this platform consistent, and one of the reasons again that led to us to this podcast. We had recorded few podcasts in the conference itself, but we want to keep it a consistent channel where we keep on giving this information and this awareness. Because like Milton Friedman says, we didn't want to waste a crisis. We want to bring in the change from the crisis itself.
Yeah, and like you said, Shyranthi, some of the podcasts that we recorded at the Reform Now conference were topics that we've been talking about for some time. So like debt restructuring, the Chinese debt trap, trade reforms and social safety nets. These are all topics that we've been talking a lot in Advocata for quite some time, especially when it comes to debt restructuring. It's something that we spoke about many years ago, and we also highlighted the very need for it. And then similarly, in terms of trade reforms, we had this series called the Deep Dive series, where we went in depth into the issues with trade and what needs to be done in terms of reform. So these are all topics that we've been talking about. And I think moving forward as well, we're looking at, recording more podcasts where we've similar to the topics that we've done and much more, and bringing more awareness about the need for reforms, especially like you said during this time of economic crisis. So Shyranthi, maybe we can talk a little bit about the upcoming podcast episodes.
Yes. So apart from the topics you just mentioned, we are also planning to do a few more topics like the land reforms, labor law reforms, taxation, and even reforming state-owned enterprises, because we want to focus not just immediate actions, we also want to focus on a bigger picture for Sri Lankan economy. So for that reasons, we want to touch on a lot of topics and a lot of reforms for this podcast series.
Yeah, I think, Shyranthi, that gives us an overview of, what we're expecting moving forward with this Reset Now podcast. So yeah, Shyranthi, with that, we come to our end of our brief introduction of the Reset Now podcast. Thank you very much for joining us at the studio. And thank you to all our listeners as well. And we will see you in the next episode.